Will you follow me when the sky starts to change? Yeah, we won't be afraid. We'll never be the same again.
You're streaming with the Fantasy Follow. Welcome to TFF Live and Week 10 of Fantasy Football. We got a great day of football ahead. 5 games in the early window, 6 games in the late window. A little bit different today, but a great day of fantasy football. Nonetheless, we got a great show for you. Let's give you a look at what's on today's show. We got to look back at Week 9. Some player updates from around the league. We'll get you your actives and inactives for the 1 p.m. games. And we will give you our starts and sits for Week 10. Of course, as always, our live chat is open, so please feel free to get in the chat. We're answering your fantasy football questions all show, even if we're talking about something else. Feel free to drop us a chat. We'll get to those as quickly as we can. And if you're watching on replay, please leave us your comments below as well. But let's get right into it. We start out the show this week with Dalvin Cook. He has been absolutely unstoppable for the Minnesota Vikings. 206 yards rushing in Week 9, 163 yards the week before that. He has now been the top fantasy scorer of all players for 2 straight weeks. A total of 87.8 fantasy points in his last 2 games. Just unbelievable. Now, this week, he has a tough matchup going against the tough defense of the Chicago Bears on Monday night. But during the week, Coach Mike Zimmer, he talked about the abilities that Cook brings to their team in Minnesota.
He makes guys miss in the open field. I think, like the 3rd and 7, he caught the ball in the backfield, and the linebacker was there, and he stopped and cut back inside and then accelerated to the first down. He's really hard to tackle one-on-one, and let alone when there's some space. But for him to have the vision on the play that you're talking about and then be able to stop and start and make the 2 guys miss, that was pretty impressive.
Dalvin Cook leads the lead in total touchdowns this year with 13, and he has missed a couple games to injury, so even more impressive. You look at the other guys, Tyreek Hill for Kansas City with 10, Todd Gurley from Atlanta with 9, and you've got 4 players tied with 8, but it's just been Dalvin Cook's world, and we'll see if that continues this week. In Carolina, well, just when you thought Christian McCaffrey was back in the fold, nope, he is out to injury again, this time to a shoulder injury. And, this is a guy that up until this year in his career had seemed to be pretty durable in avoiding the injury problems, but not so this year. There was, in fact, some concern when he got hurt at the end of this last game versus Tampa Bay that this might actually be season-ending. And Coach Matt Rule, he was asked about that this past week.
I'm not anticipating that. I'm anticipating it from what I know being much more sort of day-to-day, week by week than that. But that's those are doctors, and they have to do what's right. What's right for him, and Christian has to make the best decision for him. So I have not entertained that thought till you said it.
Look back now at the overall action from last week, and as usual, we start at the quarterback spot. Another great game for Kyler Murray in a loss to the Miami Dolphins, 37.92 fantasy points. That was 283 yards passing with 3 touchdowns, adding another 106 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground as well. Josh Allen for the Bills in a win over the Seahawks, 36.00 fantasy points. That was 415 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, adding 14 yards on the ground and a touchdown there as well. In third, Patrick Mahomes for the Chiefs in a win over the Panthers, 30.88 fantasy points, 372 passing yards, and 4 touchdowns. And in fourth, a new guy in the top 5 here, Drew Lock for the Broncos. That was in a loss to the Falcons, 30.22 fantasy points. That was 313 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, as well as 47 rush yards and 1 rushing touchdown. And then Aaron Rodgers, steady as always, in a win over the 49ers, 28.90 fantasy points, 305 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, also adding 7 yards on the ground. Over at the wide receiver spot, the top scorer last week, it was Richie James. Who? That's right, Richie James from the 49ers. That was in a loss to the Packers. That was last week's Thursday night game. 33.40 fantasy points. That was 184 yards receiving, 9 catches, 1 touchdown. Just edging out Devontae Adams, 33.30 fantasy points in that same game. That was 173 yards receiving, 10 catches, 1 touchdown. Tyreek Hill in third in a win over the Panthers, 33.10 fantasy points, 113 yards on 9 catches with 2 touchdowns. Then Jacoby Myers, that big game for the Patriots in a win over the Jets, 28.90 fantasy points. He had 169 yards receiving, 12 catches, no touchdowns. And DJ Chark in a loss to the Texans, 27.60 fantasy points. That was 146 yards, 7 catches, 1 touchdown. Top running back scorers from last week. Well, we already talked about this guy, Dalvin Cook. This was in a win against the Lions, 39.20 fantasy points. Once again this week, the top scorer of all players, 206 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns there. In addition, 46 receiving yards, 2 catches there, no touchdowns through the air. Christian McCaffrey in a loss to the Chiefs, 37.10 fantasy points. That was 69 yards and a touchdown on the ground, 82 yards through the air, 10 catches, 1 touchdown. And then a big drop-off in third, J.D. McKissick for the Washington football team. That was in a loss against the Giants, 17.20 fantasy points, just 17 yards rushing, but 65 yards receiving, 9 catches, no touchdowns either. Kalen Ballage in a loss versus the Raiders, 16.40 fantasy points. That was 69 yards rushing, 1 touchdown, adding 15 yards, 2 catches through the air. And then a tie at that 5 spot, James Robinson from the Jaguars and Alvin Kamara from the Saints. Robinson versus Houston, it was 99 yards and 1 touchdown. Kamara versus Tampa Bay, it was 40 yards rushing with a touchdown, adding 9 receiving yards on 5 catches, no touchdowns through the air. And over at the tight end spot, top scorer last week, Travis Kelce, another great game. That was in a win versus the Panthers, 25.90 fantasy points, 159 yards receiving, 10 catches, no touchdowns. In second, it was Jimmy Graham for the Bears. That was in a loss against the Titans, 17.50 fantasy points, 55 yards on 6 catches and 1 touchdown. Evan Ingram in third in a win against the Washington football team, 15.80 fantasy points, 48 yards, 5 catches, 1 touchdown. Then it was Irv Smith in fourth for the Vikings. That was in a win against the Lions, 15.00 fantasy points, 10 yards receiving, 2 catches, but 2 touchdowns. And the ever-steady T.J. Hawkinson in a loss to Minnesota, 14.90 fantasy points, 39 yards receiving, 5 catches, and 1 touchdown. All right, let's get you some player updates from around the league from during this past week. And today we will start out in Cleveland.
I was asking about Nick as well, so if I can just follow up on that a little bit. It seemed like he was on pace. I mean, he took the brace off and he practiced without the brace, I think, today, and I watched him practice yesterday without it. Did he make the kind of progress that you wanted to see? What do you still need to happen before you feel comfortable getting him on the football field on Sunday?
Yeah, Mary Kay, like you said, we wanted to use each one of these days and see how he responded each day. He hit all the benchmarks, so it's just a matter of making sure we're all on the same page and make sure that he's ready to go. And if he's ready, he'll be out there. And if we feel like he's not ready this week, we'll make that decision.
With Robinson, with all the inconsistency on offense and all the problems you've been trying to solve, what has it meant to you to have his reliability every day, not just in the games with the production, but behind the scenes?
It's huge because it's that trust word that you just see and you know that at any given time on the field, you can go to him. We always talk about when he's covered, he's uncovered, and I think that kind of makes sense with a guy like him. But the other part that just means so much to me with Allen is that he just takes this game so seriously every single day. He's so consistent, and I love that about him. There's never a day where he treats a little bit different because it's a Wednesday, 2 days after a game. He treats a Wednesday like he does game day, and that's hard to find in every single player. And so you build that trust as a coach, and then when it comes to crunch time, you just know that he's done it consistently in his career, and we love that. We love having him.
Now that Alshon appears close to returning, how do you get him into the lineup without it taking snaps away from some of these young receivers who've developed for you?
Yeah, well, we do have a plan for him, and without revealing that plan, listen, we got to get through another day of practice first. I mean, he's done a good job with his rehab and put himself in a position to practice this week and have a full complement of practice participation. And so we'll see again today. But look, he's a veteran player. He's been one of our starters, and we've got a plan to if he's ready to go to get him in the game. He could obviously a big receiver that can help, and he knows the offense and knows what we're doing.
Well, it's just you're asking me a question I didn't even know it was something until you just said it. So it's hard for me to really put into perspective other than just to say I think that's really something. Wow. Lamar will tell you it's a team effort, and I think the team will tell you couldn't win those games without Lamar. And Lamar he's our guy. We're with him. We're with him all the way, 100%. We've got his back. We believe in him. We love him, and he's just he's that kind of a person. So he gives you everything he's got every single week. And you're going to have critics in this league. You're going to have critics in life. That's part of it. He understands that. He's really good about that. All of our guys are. So that part of it kind of doesn't really matter. But that accomplishment, yeah, you're right. That accomplishment is pretty amazing. And a shout out to Dan Marino. He's a good guy. Love Dan Marino. So out there, Dan, there you go. Okay. Congratulations. You and Lamar.
Actives and inactives are up next for the 1 p.m. games. But before we do that, we want to remind you that we are here each week. The TFF Live Sunday Pregame Show. If you are new to the stream, welcome. If you are regular, welcome back. We're here every Sunday at 12 noon, taking you right up until game time, answering all your fantasy football questions, and getting you ready for your matchups each week. Actives and inactives up next. All right, before we get to your actives and inactives, we got some early chat to go through today, so we'll get to that first. We always want to get to that as soon as possible, so this is the time to do that. And for those of you on the stream, thank you for being here. We're here until game time, so please feel free to jump in the chat, ask us any questions that you have. We will start out with Larry. Larry says, Joe, hi. So this is kind of like the reverse of the normal. It's usually hi, Joe. But Larry, hi. Good to have you with us again, Larry. Always good to see our regulars back. Take a look at our next chat here, and this looks like a new viewer to our stream, so hope I said the name right. Please tell me if I don't. Bobby Schmerda. Bobby, welcome to the stream. Glad to have you with us. He has a question. He says, start Travis Fulgham, Jalen Reagor, or Justin Jefferson, PPR. Well, here's what I'm going to do for you, Bobby. I'm going to give you a rundown of the matchups here real quick to give you a look at what's in play with these guys, and I've got them up on my other screen here. So for both Fulgham and Reagor for the Eagles playing the Giants. The Giants currently allowing the 10th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. I can tell you, because I already have this down on my notes, that the other matchup you had was Jefferson against Chicago. That's the Monday night game. They're actually allowing the third fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. So if I was going to pick here, and I'm assuming this is a pick one, not a pick two, I think your choice is between Fulgham and Reagor. And it's just going to come down to who do you trust more at this point. Obviously, Fulgham has been seeing the lion's share of the targets there in Philadelphia, but that was with plenty of players out due to injury. Reagor is playing today. Alshon Jeffrey is back in the lineup today. You've got Dallas Goedert back at tight end. So plenty more mouths to feed. It's just a matter of whether or not Fulgham or Reagor gets the work. I really do like Reagor quite a bit. But I think because Fulgham is the guy that you've seen getting the volume so far to this point, I would say stick with him until proven otherwise. So to me, out of these three, I'd say Travis Fulgham is your start. As always, try to give you our best opinions we can, backed up by some information, but you know your roster's best. Go with your gut. But I think it's definitely between those two Eagles. And to me, I think Fulgham is a decent bet there as a player to pick. Thank you, Bobby, for being with us. Thank you for the chat. Again, any of you that have questions, jump in the chat right away and get them to us, and we will go through as many as we can throughout this show. Our next chat is from Darren Hopkins, another regular. Welcome back, Darren. Good to see you on the stream again. And you are asking Will Fuller or Cooper Kupp. This is one of those that I don't know if you can go wrong with either of these guys. I will say that I have both these guys on my start list this week. Taking a look at Will Fuller, I actually have as the very top start this week for me, playing against Cleveland. The Browns are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. I think it's going to be a big game for Will Fuller. He has been lighting it up, so I don't think you can go wrong there. Cooper Kupp saw 20 targets last week against Miami. Against Seattle, allowing the very most fantasy points in the league to the wide receiver spot. So I don't know how you can go wrong with either one of these two guys. I think it's just flip a coin, basically, at this point. Let's see if there's a difference in when they're playing at all here. Taking a look at the different times. Oh, yeah, that Cleveland game is in the 1 o'clock window, and the Rams game is at the 4 o'clock window. So, last ditch, take a look at your matchup and find out if the person that you're playing has anybody involved in this decision. Are they playing Deshaun Watson as a quarterback? Are they streaming Jared Goff? Perhaps you want to make sure and protect yourself against any points that they might get. But I personally, this is so tough. I'm playing Cooper Kupp in a couple of spots today. Will Fuller, I don't have any on any rosters, so that's just from personal note. But I think Will Fuller has been so good He's the number one guy to me there. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are probably going to split that workload of some sort. I expect there's plenty to go around for both of them there. Again, go with your gut. This is probably a coin flip. I don't think you can go wrong with either of these choices. If it were me, I would probably go with Fuller. But again, I don't think you can go wrong with either of these two guys. Again, Darren, thank you very much for the chat. Appreciate all you guys being on the live stream. Again, we are a brand new channel here on YouTube. So if those of you that have been here before, welcome back. If you're new, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you're able to get those notifications whenever we have new content. As a new channel, we don't necessarily come up quite as high on the searches right now, so it might be a little tougher to find us. We want to make sure that you get those notifications whenever we have new content out. And again, thank you guys both for the chats. And let's move right on over here. All right, actives and inactives. We have 5 games in the 1 o'clock window, 6 games in the 4 o'clock window. Kind of interesting, not usual to have more games in the second run than the first, but we will go through the 1 o'clock games starting in Houston. Starting in Cleveland, where Houston is playing. Of note there, I have not double-checked the weather, but it did not look great. I know the weather here is not good, and I am not that far from Cleveland. I'm in Buffalo. So it is raining here, and in fact, I was a little bit worried about my internet connection. I know last night I had some trouble during our live show that we did last night. So far, it seems like we're all right, but hopefully we are able to finish this show at any rate. Anyways, in this game, players to note for Houston: David Johnson, concussion protocol, and has been placed on IR. Very strange move to me. I'm not understanding this play on the part of the Texans. Duke Johnson is obviously the guy there now with David Johnson out. However, concussion protocol, the IR is a minimum of 3 weeks. It's usually not 3 weeks to get back from that. So I'm really not sure if they're not trying to say, hey, Duke Johnson, this is your shot to show us what you got for the next few weeks. It kind of seems like that could be it. At any rate, David Johnson is out, and also KEKE COUTEE has been out for, it seems like, several seasons at this point. Always on the inactive list for the Texans. Very notable on the other side of that list is the return of Nick Chubb today. Thank goodness for all of you who have Nick Chubb on your fantasy rosters, as I do in a couple of spots. So glad to have him back. It sounds like everything went very well in practice this week. They're expecting him to get a full workload. I even did hear that they're expecting Kareem Hunt to be kind of in a spell type role to kind of take up the slack and not necessarily get an even split. I do think Nick Chubb is going to be plenty fine today. I think there's plenty to go around in this matchup. And as well, Austin Hooper making his first return after being gone for a few weeks. I also like Austin Hooper in this spot. I think some good opportunities for fantasy value in this matchup today. All right, that's our first game. The next game we're going to look at is Washington at Detroit. A couple of notable players here, starting with Washington. It's Dontrell Inman, who has been out for a bit. On the Detroit side, of course, Kenny Golladay, again, is out this week. Tough one here. We will have to see what happens if Marvin Jones, who did not get as much of the work last week as I quite possibly expected him to. We'll see what happens there among their wide receivers. Good news for Detroit is TJ Hawkinson is active for this game. There was some concern over him during the week, but TJ Hawkinson, the Hawk, is active, and he's been great all year. Another interesting game here. We'll have some of these players in this game will appear on our start-sit list coming up in a little bit on this show. All right, don't forget, before we get to the next game, we are here to answer your fantasy football questions all show, so jump in the live chat. Even if we are on other content, we will get to your chat and answer your questions throughout the remainder of the rest of the show. In the meantime, we will go back to some more actives and inactives. The next game up, Jacksonville at Green Bay. Nothing on the Green Bay side. It's going to be Jake Luton getting the start at quarterback again for the Jags, as Gardner Minshew is out. Laviska Shenault is also out at the wide receiver spot for Jacksonville. So we will see what happens there. DJ Chark sees another nice amount of targets as he did last game. I know that I sat DJ Chark in a couple of spots and paid for it because I was not sure what was going to happen with that quarterback change. And hopefully this week is a little bit more reward for getting him back in the lineup as well. Keelan Cole, a possibility there. Green Bay, a little bit tougher against the pass, but we will see what happens in that game. All right, next game up at the 1 o'clock slot is Philadelphia and the New York Football Giants. Couple of players of note here as Philly is starting to get a little bit healthier. They are still without J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. However, Alshon Jeffrey is back this week. I am going to double check because he was not on the inactives, but I just want to make sure there are no surprises because they've been talking about the return of Alshon Jeffrey for a long time, and we have yet to see it. So I just want to check his reports from during the week, and it does not show anything for him at all. Said he practiced in full on Friday. So it looks like Alshon Jeffrey is back. In addition, you'll see Jalen Reagor today for the Eagles. Again, who knows what that means for Travis Fulgham. I should also mention Miles Sanders back in the lineup. I did not put him on the graphic, but Miles Sanders is active in this game. I'm going to double check that just to see if there's any reports. And yes, they say Miles Sanders practiced in full on Friday, so feel free to fire him up. I think it's a good spot for Miles Sanders to get back in the action today. And Dallas Goedert as well expected to play in this game. So Philadelphia perhaps starting to see their season kind of turn into more what they may have expected it to be, minus perhaps Zach Ertz. But Zach Ertz was kind of minus the entire time that he was playing this year anyways. So that's Philadelphia and the New York Football Giants. Also should mention Devontae Freeman is now on IR for the Giants. So get him out of any lineups where you might have him. Wayne Gallman seems to be the guy that's taking the lead in the backfield there for the New York team. All right, next game we'll take a look at here is the Tampa Bay Tom Brady's and the Carolina Panthers. Of course, we know that Christian McCaffrey is once again not playing this week. So unfortunate. The good news is they do expect him back soon. They don't expect this to be an extremely long-term injury. No real other players to note here other than McCaffrey. You would expect that Mike Davis will get a full workload today. Tampa Bay a little bit tougher on the defense, so you might have a little bit of a decision if you're going to play Mike Davis versus some other players. Some other players to watch, Chris Godwin trying to recover from that finger injury for Tampa Bay. Of course, you'll probably see Antonio Brown worked into the lineup a little bit more this week. How does that all shake out? And then still in the backfield there between Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. I will have some of those guys in our starts and sits coming up a little bit later in this show. That is it for the early run of games. Back on camera here, I see some chats, so we will get to those momentarily. Worth mentioning, we do have 6 games in the afternoon window. Denver and Las Vegas, LA Chargers and Miami. Those are both, and Buffalo and Arizona. Those are all 4:05 starts. I'm racking my brain to think and remember if there was anybody notable who was questionable in those games off the top of my head. Not sure about Noah Fant's status. I don't think there was anybody for Las Vegas, Miami. I'm not sure that there was anybody there other than possibly Matt Breida. Buffalo, not aware of anybody there. And the 4:25 games, Seattle and the LA Rams. Seattle, again, without Carlos Hyde and Chris Carson. It'll be interesting to see what happens there between DJ Dallas, Travis Homer. Don't believe anybody on the Rams side of note. San Francisco and New Orleans is a 4:25 game. Michael Thomas back in the fold there. San Francisco still no Raheem Mostert, no Deebo Samuel, no George Kittle. You run down the list. I don't even think Jimmy Garoppolo is back yet. It's just a host of injuries for the 49ers. Then we've got Cincinnati-Pittsburgh at 4:25. Don't believe there are any injuries to note there. Ben Roethlisberger's back in the fold. The Sunday night games, Baltimore and New England, and the Monday night game, Minnesota and Chicago. All right, let's jump over here, and I see some chat comments, so let's get to these as quickly as we can. We have Bill Romanowski. Bill, glad to have you with us. I hope it's going well with the fantasy football career after the actual football career. By all means, let's see what we got here. You're asking Kareem Hunt or Antonio Gibson at running back. I think those are both fine starts this week. I have Kareem Hunt actually as my top start when I will go through that list at the running back spot. I'm just going to pull up my notes real quick. Kareem Hunt is Let's see. Where is he? Yeah, Houston, the third most fantasy points to the running back spot. I definitely think that there's plenty to go around in this game, even if Nick Chubb does get a full workload. I think you'll see Hunt, who did show still good value when Chubb was in the lineup. I think he'll be fine. Antonio Gibson, he's still going to be splitting time with J.D. McKissick, so it's a similar situation. However, they're playing the Detroit Lions. They're allowing the most fantasy points to the running back spot. I think this is flip a coin. I think that the difference here is that more than likely Chubb will get the goal line touches for Cleveland, and Gibson will probably get the goal line touches for Washington. I would expect both of these teams to have those opportunities. So I think, to me, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of these guys based on the fact that I would probably give a slight edge in this case. I don't know. It's very close. I could see an argument for both. Gibson, the goal line touches could make the decision for you. I would say, Bill, if you're still on, I see you're saying, thanks, man. Glad to hear. No, thank you, Bill, for being here. And Bill, if you want to hit me back in the chat, tell me, are you playing, if you're still on, PPR or non-PPR? I think that may make your decision. I would say if you're playing a PPR league, Kareem Hunt, because he's going to get the pass catching. If you're in a non-PPR, Antonio Gibson's going to get the goal line. So I would say use that to your advantage to make that choice for you, but I don't think you can go wrong with either of those two guys. And no matter who we pick, as always, hope that guy crushes it for you. All right, Bill, thanks for being here. Next up, we're going to go to a regular I see here in the chat, Mary Dadon. And I still hope I'm saying that correctly. Let me know sometime if I'm not. I see a couple of questions here from you. So, Bill Romanowski, by the way, you say non-PPR, then I think Antonio Gibson is a fine choice for you there. But again, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of there, just to show there the last part of that. All right, let's go back to Mary Dadon. Chase Edmonds or Duke Johnson? This has been a popular question. I got this a couple times on last night's live stream. To me, the difference here is keep an eye on what's happening with Kenyon Drake. If you don't hear anything different, and I'm going to look it up for you just to double check if there are any notifications. If Kenyon Drake is playing, he is questionable. Obviously, this is the late game. Duke Johnson is the early game. The reports were from yesterday. Adam Schefter from ESPN reported that Drake has a good chance to play. It's still a game time decision. To me, that's enough to go away from Chase Edmonds here. Even though I think that if Drake does play, they'll necessarily not give him a full workload coming back from injury. But Duke Johnson's the only guy there for Houston. And it appears with the fact that they put David Johnson on IR, they are willing to give Johnson some opportunity to show what he can do there. So I would like Duke Johnson of these two players. If for some reason you get word before the first run of games that Drake is out, that might change your mind. But I think Duke Johnson is a solid choice here. And another question here is John Brown or Stephon Diggs against the Cardinals. I don't think you can, if you're picking between these two, I don't think you can go away from Diggs because he's been so good. For all intents and purposes, John Brown could have a great game, especially if Patrick Peterson kind of shadows Diggs. But you're leaving a lot to chance to go away from a guy who's like the WR4 or so right now, I think, off the top of my head, that Diggs is. I didn't think both of these players are playable, but if you're choosing between the two, I would say Diggs. And then I see another question here, Ebron or Jimmy Graham. I actually have both of these players on my start list this week. Of the two, I like Jimmy Graham's matchup better. Playing against the Bengals, they're allowing the second most fantasy points to the tight end spot. Jimmy Graham playing the Vikings. The Vikings have certainly allowed plenty of passing yards. However, they are 13th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. I've been talking about Eric Ebron for quite a few weeks as a potential tight end streamer because I liked his matchups during this run. So I like Eric Ebron of those two. But, of course, as I always say, you guys know your lineups better than anybody. So if there's ever a question, go with your gut. But I like Ebron there. And Saints or Green Bay D. Let's see. Who are we playing today? New Orleans. I'll find it here. We got New Orleans playing against they're somewhere on the list. San Francisco. San Francisco really banged up. Green Bay against Jacksonville. This is a toss-up for me just because the Saints were so good last week. I think that Green Bay is a very reasonable choice, probably the preferred matchup of the two. Jacksonville playing a rookie quarterback. I do think they are without Jair Alexander, however. I think that I saw that on the rundown. Let me go look on the inactives and help you out with that because that definitely makes a difference for their defense. Yeah, Jair Alexander, cornerback for the Green Bay Packers, is out today. So that might be enough to swing you towards New Orleans between those two teams. And then let me see one more from Married. We're actually, this is like a set your lineup segment at this point, but I like it. John Brown or Robert Woods? No question in this one. It's Robert Woods to me. Hands down, Seattle allowing the most fantasy points in the league to wide receivers. So if you're looking at a question of who you're going to start and you end up starting Robert Woods and Stephon Diggs, I think you're in good shape there. I would definitely start Woods over Brown, even if Brown does have a great game. Again, you're talking Robert Woods. He's the 1A or the 1B in LA. We know that the Rams like to run the ball, but this is not going to be a running game against Seattle. This is just the way it's played out with all these games. You saw what Buffalo did last week against them. They are going to throw the ball either because they have to or because they choose to. I think it's a big day for Woods and Cooper Kupp. So I like Robert Woods as a choice of those two. Mary to Don, thank you for being back with us again. We're glad to see you, and we hope to see you on future streams. And for all of you that are new to the stream, as I see Bill Romanowski, the biggest celebrity so far that we have had on our TFF Live Sunday pregame show, is a new sub. And thank you, Bill. And we appreciate all of you for joining and getting those subs going. We do have a goal of 100 new subscribers. We appreciate you helping us reach that goal. And also, we definitely want you to be able to get those notifications whenever we have new content. A lot of chats today. This is great. We love this. Brandon, Brian, college. See, now, before I put it on the screen, I look down and I see Brandon. I've done that a couple times now. I apologize, Braden. Should know this. I should know better. Braden Toll says Justin Jefferson or Marvin Jones Jr. To me, it's Marvin Jones Jr. of these two. The Chicago Bears are allowing, let me look it up because I have the actual stat right here. They are allowing the third fewest passing yards to the wide receiver position. Anybody playing the Bears, it's just really tough. Detroit against Washington. Washington also tough against the pass, but Marvin Jones without Kenny Golladay has the potential. I said that last week also, and we didn't see him really get the targets, but he did have a touchdown. Jones has the potential to be kind of the target leader in that game. Justin Jefferson, you've got Adam Thielen there. Between the two of them, I really don't like either of them this week. I like Minnesota to continue to run the ball with Dalvin Cook. I think if there's any way to hit the Bears, you've got a better chance of hitting them on the ground than through the air. So of these two, I would pick Marvin Jones for you, but let us know how it works out. And by all means, like I said, whoever you pick, I hope they crush it. And thank you, Braden, for being back with us. We appreciate all you guys for being along for these shows. Let me see Jay in the chat. Jay says Fuller or Henderson Jr. Will Fuller all the way. LA Rams is going to be not only do you have the many running backs for the Rams. I'm not sure if all three are healthy with Malcolm Brown, Cam Akers. I think they're all healthy. But the Rams are throwing the ball in this game against Seattle. Seattle is just giving up air yards like nobody's business. This is going to be a big wide receiver day for that team. I think just as it was for the Bills last week. Will Fuller has a great matchup. He's played great. He has had about 75 games in a row with a touchdown at this point, I think. So my choice between these two is Will Fuller. Hopefully, let us know how it works out, Jay. And by all means, like I said, if you're feeling it, go with it. If you're feeling the other way, go with your gut. But I think Fuller is a very, very good choice in this one. And again, Jay, if you're new to the stream, which it looks like you might be, appreciate you being here. By all means, make sure and hit that subscribe button, get those notifications. Last night we did an impromptu show, and for those of you that are already subscribed to the channel, you were able to find out about that show and possibly get in and ask any questions that you had done as well. So make sure and get those subs going, and we appreciate that. All right, Mary to Don, another question here. Pick 3. Diggs, Brandon Cooks, Christian Kirk, Robert Woods, John Brown. All right, let's do this. We'll pick 3. I'm picking Robert Woods for sure. That is the number 1 pick out of these 3. Stephon Diggs, you can't go away from him. He's been too good. Even if he does get shadowed by Patrick Peterson, I still think that Diggs has put up numbers consistently the entire year, regardless of who he's been playing. I think sitting him is, who are you going to be more upset if you sit and they have a big game between like Diggs and a John Brown? I think Diggs is a choice here. And I like Brandon Cooks against Cleveland. I will say that I have been struggling with a decision in one of my leagues between Brandon Cooks and Tyler Lockett. And I have actually decided to play Brandon Cooks over Tyler Lockett this week because of that matchup for Seattle against the Rams D, even though I do expect that Jalen Ramsey probably will shadow DK Metcalf, meaning that Lockett will have some opportunity. I do have Lockett in a couple of spots, so he's not out of all my lineups. But in the one particular one where I had the choice between Cooks And Lockett, I went with Cooks. So I would pick Woods, Diggs, Cooks for my 3 out of these players. And Mary to Don, again, thank you for being here, and thank you for being in the chat. And we appreciate all of you guys. This is what we want to do. We love talking fantasy football with you guys. And without you guys here in the chat, we can give you lots of content, but it's basically just us talking to you. So we appreciate all of you being in the chat. We will put up our notification again. Our live chat is open for the rest of the show. We got about 20 minutes left answering all your fantasy football questions. Next up, we are going to start out with our starts and sits for today. And let's see here. Well, I'm going to make sure I don't miss any comments here. And I see Mary Dedon, Christian Kirk might go off. I do agree. Christian Kirk has been great. I could potentially see, if you're going to think about Kirk of those 3, possibly playing him over Cooks. However, the matchups here do favor. I want to check Buffalo because I believe Buffalo is allowing the 17th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. So let me call up Arizona for you just to give you that information. Hopefully help you along and reach whatever decision you're going to go after there. Let's see. Buffalo allowing the 8th fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. And Cleveland, I have that one in my notes, is allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. So the matchup there favors Cooks. It's all a matter of whether you think the volume also favors him. I know Cooks is a player that's, because of the start of the year, a lot of players are a little bit scared off of, but Cooks has been very good in recent weeks. If I can get it up, I will give you the target totals from the last few weeks from his games. And here it is. The last 4 games for Cooks in order: targets 12, 9, 9, 9. Touchdowns in 3 of those 4 games, and one of those games had 161 yards and none under 60 in those 4. So again, by all means, you absolutely know your roster better than anybody. Go with your gut, check out your matchup, find out if there's anybody on the other side of that matchup, that makes a difference. That perhaps Kyler Murray is your opposing quarterback. Perhaps Deshaun Watson is your opposing quarterback. That might sway you one way or the other. I think either one of those 2 are fine choices. For me, I like Cooks. And you say thanks. No, thank you for being with us again. I thank all you guys for being in the chat. And it might be windy. Yes, I do think checking the weather, which that is something that I have not done a deep dive on here to see what the weather looks like in Cleveland. That would turn that game into more of a running game. So yes, that definitely does impact your decision. And matter of fact, I may have to take a look at that to see if I want to get Tyler Lockett back in my lineup for that one particular game. So yeah, I have not checked that. Let's see if there's anything that I can look up on that real quick for you. Let's see here. Cleveland. Nope, I got something else up on my screen. Let's see. Show me the Cleveland Browns, please. Let's see. There they are. And right now, in terms of what Yahoo says, wind 50 degrees, only 24% chance of rain, wind speed 27 miles per hour. That's not good for passing. So yeah, I do think you are correct. That may play a role in your decision. So yes, a deep dive there says that may sway you the other direction. I'm hoping it works out because I'm probably going to end up sticking with Cooks. But by all means, I could see the argument there to make that switch. And thank you again, Mary Dedon, for being with us. Let's do this. Let's put up the chat is open comment here for you. And let's go ahead. Actually, before we do that, let's get you the start of the starts and sits so that we don't double cross ourselves here. All right, we'll start out at the quarterback spot, as always, for our starts and sits. And let me just get things situated here. All right, there we go. Much better. All right, so our top start this week is going to be Deshaun Watson for the Houston Texans. The Cleveland Browns allowing the 10th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. They've allowed 24 or more fantasy points 4 times this year. They have allowed over 400 or more passing yards twice, and they're giving up the 9th most passing yards in the league. Watson, 24 or more fantasy points in 4 straight games, and 2 or more touchdowns in 5 straight. Even if the weather is an issue there, obviously Deshaun Watson is a quarterback who will not be afraid to get on the ground and run himself. So I think that gives you a nice floor there as well in that particular situation. I like Deshaun Watson as the top start this week. The rest of the quarterback starts. Number 2, I've got Aaron Rodgers for the Green Bay Packers. Rodgers playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the quarterback spot. They've given up 24 or more 5 times this year. They've given up 300 yards or more 4 times and are allowing the 5th most passing yards in the league. Rodgers, steady as always. Last 3 games, 11 touchdowns and 22 or more fantasy points in 6 out of 8. I like Aaron Rodgers to start this week. Kind of a no-brainer there. And the 3rd spot is Jared Goff. The only reason why Goff didn't earn my top spot this week with that matchup is because of the fact that I was a little bit leery that he's kind of been up and down. He's only actually had 1 game over 19 fantasy points in his last 5. However, in his 2 games against Seattle last year, averaged 344 yards passing. Seattle has certainly given up more yards this year than they did last year. So I like Goff as a start. And for that matter, the Seattle Seahawks have allowed 23 or more fantasy points to 6 quarterbacks. They've allowed 29 or more to 4 quarterbacks, giving up the most passing yards in the league and also the most fantasy points to the quarterback spot, Jared Goff. Number 4 is Drew Lock from the Broncos. Playing at the Raiders, allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the quarterback spot. They have given up 23 or more fantasy points 4 of the last 5 games. Lock's fantasy points have increased in several games in a row now, and he had 30.22 last week at Atlanta. So I like Drew Lock again this week as a top start. And at number 5, interesting name here, Tua Tagovailoa. Talked about this a little bit on the show that we did with the waiver wire this week. I believe that this is a stretch for Tua where we're going to find out what he has. He's got a nice run of games coming up here. This week against the Chargers, they allow the 4th most fantasy points to the quarterback spot. They've given up 19 or more in 5 games this year and 2 or more touchdowns in each of the last 3 weeks. They're actually allowing just the 17th most passing yards, but still yet the 4th most fantasy points to the quarterback spot. And that tells you that the yards are not driving that, the touchdowns are. So I expect Tua to have a nice game and a couple touchdowns today. Last week at Arizona, 21.42 fantasy points. He is starting to show his worth there, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in this game. Top quarterback sit this week is Matthew Stafford for the Detroit Lions. In a tough matchup against the Washington football team, they allowed the 10th fewest fantasy points to the quarterback position. They have held 6 opposing quarterbacks under 15 fantasy points this year, and they're giving up the fewest passing yards in the league. Stafford, again, without Kenny Golladay this week. In the games that Golladay has missed, Stafford has averaged 14.92 fantasy points. I think this is a tough spot here. Again, Matthew Stafford's one of those guys that sometimes seems tough to predict, but nonetheless, I have him as the top sit this week. Tough defense, missing your top receiver, Matthew Stafford, number 1 on this list. The rest of the top 5, Kirk Cousins at number 2 for the Vikings playing against the Bears. Chicago allowing the 2nd fewest fantasy points to the quarterback spot. They have given up, they've only allowed one week where they've allowed over 18 fantasy points, and the 7th fewest passing yards being allowed in the league right now by the Bears. Last year against Chicago, Kirk Cousins, 0 touchdowns and a whopping 7.32 fantasy points in the only game that he faced them. Cousins has certainly been up and down this year, but in the last 2 games since Dalvin Cook returned, he has only averaged 17 passing attempts. So again, I like this as a running game, not a passing game. I've got Kirk Cousins as a sit this week. Teddy Bridgewater at number 3 versus the Bucs. Tampa Bay allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points to the quarterback position. They've only had 3 opposing quarterbacks go over 19 fantasy points this year, and they are giving up the 14th fewest passing yards in the league. Bridgewater last year versus the Bucs when he was playing for the Saints did have a nice game, 314 yards, 4 touchdowns. Had a nice game last week against Kansas City as well. I just think this is a tough matchup. Teddy Bridgewater on the sit list this week as well. Now, these last 2 to me are really close. I've got Tom Brady there due to the matchup. Carolina allowing the 9th fewest fantasy points to the quarterback spot. I fully expect after that game that Tampa Bay put up last week for Tom Brady to have a big game today. So this is a tough guy for me to have on a sit list. But just based on the matchup, I had to put him there. They're allowing they've allowed under 19 fantasy points 3 of the last 5, and Brady had a whopping 5.36 fantasy points with 3 interceptions last week. Joe Burrow, also a close one for me. The matchup is bad. Pittsburgh allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points to the quarterback spot. They have not allowed a single quarterback over 20 points against them this year, giving up the 5th fewest passing yards in the league. Burrow has actually been under 19 fantasy points for the last 5 games. I do think this is going to be a pass-heavy game on both sides. So if anything, I think that saves you if you want to play Joe Burrow this week, but I do have him as one of my top sits. All right, let's get back over here. I do see a new comment in the chat here, so let's scroll down and get this up on the screen and see what we can do for you here from Disc Golf Chaos. I like that name. Welcome, Disc Golf Chaos. I believe you're new to the stream. Glad to have you with us. Full PPR, Wayne Gallman, DJ Dallas, Travis Homer, Kalen Ballage. So of these 4, I'm going to assume this is a pick 1 and not a pick 2. Of these 4, I'm looking at which one of these players has the majority lead in terms of that backfield, and to me, that's Wayne Gallman. DJ Dallas had that one nice game when he was the only guy there, and then last week when Homer returned, it was much more of a split. Matter of fact, I have DJ on my sit list coming up next here. I actually do have his stats. So in the week when he was the only guy, he saw 79% of snaps. That was week 8. Last week, only 31% of snaps. And that was only with Homer back in the backfield. In a tough matchup, the Rams are allowing the 7th fewest fantasy points to the running back spot. So I don't love either of those guys. Kalen Ballage, your question there is what happens in that Chargers backfield? Does Joshua Kelly have an impact, or does Ballage get the bulk? We know that Justin Jackson is out there. I like Wayne Gallman out of these guys. I think that's I don't necessarily have his matchup right up in front of me. Let me see if I can get that really quick. If not, we'll move on so that we don't miss out on anybody else. But let me see if I can get his matchup for the New York Football Giants. All right. Okay, so in terms of the running back, Philadelphia, they are 9th fewest fantasy points to the running back spot. So they are not an easy out. Again, I'm looking at weather here. This game in New York, 19 miles per hour wind is what Yahoo is saying here. That's relatively significant. At any rate, I think volume carries the day in terms of making this choice. I like Wayne Gallman as the guy. Again, Devontae Freeman on IR. Of course, you have Deion Lewis there, but he's a change of pace type back. I think Gallman has the bulk of that work and certainly the goal line touches there. Hard to say who gets them in either of those other 2 matchups, although I think Kalen Ballage probably would be my second choice, just if you happen to like him more than Gallman. But to me, I like Wayne Gallman as the choice here. And again, Disc Golf Chaos, you know your roster better than anybody. By all means, I give you my input. Go with your gut. Take that for what it's worth. But absolutely, I hope no matter who you play, I hope they crush it. And again, if you're new to the stream, glad to have you here. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Again, we are a brand new channel, so we do not necessarily come up as high in the searches. We're glad that you found us. We want to make sure that you get those notifications whenever we have new content. So Disc Golf, hope that choice ends up being a great one for you today, and glad to have you here on the stream. All right, let's go back to our starts and sits. We will pick up where we left off, and that will be the wide receivers next. All right, wide receiver starts and sits for week 10. Just getting things in order here. All right. Well, we got a little less than 10 minutes, so we're going to fly through these a little bit faster. Let's see what we got. All right, the top start at the wide receiver spot is Will Fuller playing the Cleveland Browns, allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Fuller, a touchdown in 6 straight games now, 100 or more yards in 3 of those 6. Cleveland has allowed 12 or more fantasy points 6 times in the last 3 weeks. 6 times in the last 3 weeks. I repeated that for effect. Did you like that? 11 catches to Tyler Boyd in week 7. They're giving up the 9th most passing yards in the league. I really like Will Fuller. I think he's having a great year. I think it's been, knock on wood, one of those years where he finally has not seen the injuries be a big problem. I like him as the top start this week. And the rest of the top 5, Robert Woods in a great matchup here. Robert Woods is the guy that I chose between Woods and Kupp to put in this top 5. I think he's more of the big play player, and I think Seattle's going to give that up. I think Cooper Kupp is going to get his as well. But again, Seattle allowing the most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Allen Robinson against the Vikings. Minnesota allowing the second most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Allen Robinson should be healthy for this game from all reports that I've read. The Vikings have allowed 22 or more fantasy points to 5 wide receivers this year. 22 or more. That is huge. And Robinson last year in 2 games against Minnesota averaged 15 fantasy points, and he averaged 8 catches in those 2 games, like Robinson as a start this week. Keenan Allen, I love all year long at this point, playing the Dolphins. Miami is allowing the 12th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. He's seen great chemistry with Justin Herbert. 11 or more targets, 5 of the last 6 games. 100 or more yards, 2 of the last 3 games. I like Keenan Allen this week. And I also like Chase Claypool against the Bengals. The matchup is a little bit lower, 17th most, so they're right in the middle. However, during the week, there was a report that Cincinnati was practicing John Ross in their secondary because of injuries. They were moving one of their wide receivers to their secondary. That tells you Cincinnati is very banged up. And we know that Big Ben is not afraid to throw the ball. So I like Chase Claypool in this game. I also think that the other receivers will probably get theirs as well. I think this is a big passing game. Pittsburgh because they can, and Cincinnati because they have to. So I do like this spot for the wide receivers. Top sit is going to be Adam Thielen. This is a big name as your top sit. But again, Chicago Bears, all season long we've talked about this. Tough against the pass. 3rd fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. They're allowing the 7th fewest passing yards in the league. Thielen has been under 6 fantasy points each of the last 2 games since Dalvin Cook returned. I think this is a tough spot just based on the matchup. So I've got Adam Thielen as the top sit. And here are the rest of the top 5 as we continue to speed through this. DJ Moore again this week, got him on the list. We've seen Curtis Samuel kind of emerge there, and also not a great matchup in this game. Let's see, Moore under 8 fantasy points each of the last 2 games. I've got him as a sit again this week. Darius Slayton again versus the Eagles, 14th fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Slayton in week 7 versus Philadelphia had just 4.3 fantasy points. It's been a very up and down year. I got him as a sit. Marvin Jones with no Kenny Golladay. I still got him as a sit against Washington. The fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Tough matchup, but again, potentially an argument to play him here because the volume could carry him. So again, there's an argument to be made there. However, amongst the players that are available today based on the matchup, I did include him on the sit list. And I've also got Chris Godwin, another big name to be on a sit list. I feel that his health with the emergence of the rest of the players who can take up your passing in that game makes him a hard player to trust this week until he really can show that he's fully healthy. Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, who is going to end up with all those targets kind of remains to be seen. So I've got Chris Godwin kind of on the edge of a sit this week. All right, running back spot as we got a little under 5 minutes to go. We'll power right through these. All right, running backs, top start at the running back spot. I've still got Kareem Hunt. I know that there's a lot of talk about Nick Chubb being the lead guy there, but I think there's plenty to go around in this game. Houston allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back position. They've given up 19 or more fantasy points to 5 opposing running backs and 100 or more yards 4 times, and it would have been 5 if James Robinson had gotten 1 more yard last week. He had 99 against them. I like Kareem Hunt as the top start here this week, and the rest of the top 5. Aaron Jones, this is a great matchup. I normally might not even put Aaron Jones on a start-sit list because he is almost an auto start. However, I felt it was worthy this week because of the fact that he has missed some time to injury, and the last game was a little bit iffy. I feel no reason to be concerned with Aaron Jones, so I did include him as a start this week in another great matchup, 6th most fantasy points to the running back spot. James Conner, I like this matchup. Despite the fact that Conner saw his snap count diminish last week down to 46%, he had been averaging 63%, something to watch there as the season goes on. I think Miles Sanders returns to the lineup and has a big game today against the Giants, especially now if the weather is bad. The matchup is just a middling matchup, 15th most fantasy points, but I like Sanders to have a big game today, and I also like Leonard Fournette against the Panthers, 5th most fantasy points to the running back spot. And I do feel that Fournette is emerging as the guy over Ronald Jones, and I believe he's the guy that Tom Brady trusts, and I think that is what makes a huge difference with that team right now. Top sit at the running back spot. Sorry, Justin Hart. I got Devin Singletary from the Buffalo Bills. Middling matchup here, 17th, so it's the 16th fewest, same as 17th most fantasy points to the running back spot. They've only allowed one running back 13 or more fantasy points in the last 4 games, and Buffalo has shown that they have struggled / wanted to pass the ball. Struggled at the run / wanted to pass the ball. Singletary last week versus Seattle, just 6.4 fantasy points, only 2 rushes for 1 yard. I've got him as the top sit in a game that I expect to be high scoring and a lot of passing in that game against the Cardinals today. Rest of the top 5 here. Yeah, I've got Kenyon Drake, even if he plays here as a sit. I have not been high on Kenyon Drake this year at all. I don't think he's been all that productive. I don't think they trust him as a pass catcher there. And, you're seeing his rush work go to Kyler Murray, and a lot of his rushing touchdowns potentially go that way. So between these 2 players, listen, I'd be way more comfortable with Chase Edmonds if you could tell me that he was going to get enough of the workload to make it worth it. I don't love Kenyon Drake. I've got him as a sit here. Let's see what else we've got here. DJ Dallas. I've put him on the sit list due to the fact that I don't think it's very easy to predict what's going to happen between Dallas and Homer in that backfield, even though we do not have Hyde, we do not have Carson. J.K. Dobbins with Mark Ingram back. Forget it, Baltimore backfield. How are you going to pick there until we see something that says one of these guys is their guy? Tough to start any of them. And JaMychal Hasty, dramatic drop last week, only 6 touches against Green Bay. Jerick McKinnon, again, everyone gets Shanahan. Who knows who they're going to play there, but at this point, JaMychal Hasty lands on the sit list. And one more run of lists to go through here, so let's get it up there for you. I know that we are at 1 o'clock, but nonetheless, just in case some of those matchups are in the second window there. I know there are a lot of games there. The tight end starts and sits. The top start is TJ Hawkinson. Been great this year playing against Washington. They're allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the tight end spot. 10 or more fantasy points to 4 opposing tight ends, and they've given up 6 touchdowns to tight ends this year. Hawkinson has scored a touchdown in 4 of the last 5 games and has had 10 or more fantasy points in 6 of 8 games. I think TJ Hawkinson is one of those guys that you can really count on at this point. I wish I had him on some rosters. I don't. I would love to have him instead of the number 4 start that I have, Evan Ingram, that I have to say, oh, God, I got to start Evan Ingram again. You just never know what you're going to get with him. But I do like some of these other guys. Eric Ebron, I've been talking about, has a great matchup against Cincinnati. 2nd most fantasy points to the tight end spot. I love Ebron here. Austin Hooper, I like coming back from injury. Ingram, I guess we'll go that he's had 9 or more targets each of the last 3 games. I'll play him this week. He'll probably have 2 targets and a fumble. And then Jimmy Graham at the 5th spot, playing against the Vikings. The Vikings allowing plenty of passing yards, and Graham has been pretty good, actually, of late. 6 or more targets in 4 straight games. So I like Jimmy Graham as a start. The top sit. This guy is shocking to me that we are talking about Mark Andrews as a sit now in 2 consecutive weeks. Last week was just among the top 5. This week I've got him as the top sit. First of all, the matchup against New England, the 2nd fewest fantasy points to tight ends. They've only given up 1 touchdown to a tight end this year and none since week 3. Andrews has been under 7 fantasy points in 3 straight games. No touchdowns since week 5. He did have 5 before that, but just very interesting. This is a guy that you expected to be someone that you would really count on throughout this season, and kind of not so sure at this point. I've got Mark Andrews as the top sit. And the rest of the top 5, to go through the rest of these here, let's see what we got here. This is not the right list. This is last week's list, so that means that I loaded the wrong list. So let's get rid of that. Let's put me back on camera, and I will just go through these from what I got here in my notes. Number 2 is Jared Cook playing against San Francisco, the 5th fewest fantasy points to the tight end spot. Number 3 is Hunter Henry against the Dolphins, the 7th fewest to the tight end spot. Number 4, Russ Dwelly. I have him on the sit list because of the fact that it's going to be Jordan Reed getting the bulk. That's what all reports are saying. Dwelly obviously was filling in there for Kittle, but it looks like Jordan Reed may be healthy, and look for him to steal that work away. And at number 5, even though I have to play him today, Dallas Goedert for the Eagles in a tough matchup. The Giants allowing the 9th fewest fantasy points to the tight end spot. In week 8 against Dallas before their bye, I only saw 1 target for Goddard. I surely hope he has a better game this week because I need it. But we'll see what happens. So that's all of our starts and sits. We are just a little bit past the 1 o'clock start for those games. So again, we want to hope that everybody has a great run of games today. We appreciate all you guys for being with us in the chat. Great amount of questions today. We love chatting with you guys and talking fantasy football and working through some of those matchups for you. So let's do this before we go. Let's put up our information for you. We'll remind you that we're here every Sunday with the TFF Live Sunday pregame show, streaming live right here on our YouTube channel. We thank you for being with us. If you're new to the stream, please make sure and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you get those notifications when we have new content. Every week at 12 noon, we take you right up until game time, answering all your fantasy football questions and getting you ready for your matchups each week. And here is our run of information. The Fantasy Follow. Again, we are a brand new channel. We thank you for being here. You can also find us on Twitter at the Fantasy Follow, and that is fantasy spelled FNTSY. And if you would like to send us a fantasy football question during the week to our Twitter account, you can do so using the hashtag AskTFFLive, and we will answer those questions live on this show. Facebook/The Fantasy Follow, our website, thefantasyfollow.com. We're glad that you guys were all with us for the show today. We hope for all of you to crush it in your matchups. And by all means, hopefully another great day of football. 5 games starting right now in the 1 p.m. window, 6 in the 4 p.m. window. A lot of action coming up as we make our push towards the fantasy football playoffs. So again, as we say every week, good luck in fantasy. We'll see you next week.